Language is a tricky thing. Imagine, if you will, meeting someone who is speaking a language you've never encountered before. They try to speak to you, but the sounds hold no meaning. They try to write, but their words are mere scribbles in your eyes. How would you communicate with them? How would you understand what they are saying? You might draw a picture, or hold up an object to try and find common words that you can use for a rudimentary understanding of their language. But now imagine that everyone who has spoken that language has been dead for hundreds or thousands of years. How would you interpret the scripts left behind? It's important to understand why we want to know what all the old stuff says. History is lost until we manage to uncover it. The large bones found underground can tell the story of the dinosaurs. The ruins of ancient monuments can give insight to what former civilizations held highly. But documentation is one of the best ways to communicate with the humans of the past. Sure, we can draw conclusions from items, but to understand through writing gives us far more specific lenses to view historic societies through. I hope this gives you an appreciation at how easy it is to overcome language barriers today as we learn something new. The Rosetta Stone is currently located in the British Museum. It is actually just a small section broken off of the original larger slab. It is about 44 inches tall and 30 inches wide, made of black granodiorite, an igneous rock similar to granite. It weighs a whopping 1,680 pounds. The inscription on the stone is an official decree about Ptolemy V. This decree was inscribed into large stones called stelae, which were then put into every temple in Egypt. The decree essentially said that the priests in Memphis supported the king. The message itself is not super important on its own. What is important, however, is how it's inscribed. The decree was written 3 times on the stone. The first time was in hieroglyphs, which was a way priests would write. The second way it was written was in a language called Demotic. This was the native written language used for daily purposes, the message of the common people, if you will. Demotic itself meant the language of the people. The final language the message was written in was Ancient Greek. Here's why. Alexander the Great had already pursued his conquest at this point, leaving many Greco-Macedonian rulers to run different areas of Egypt. So Ancient Greek had become the language of the administration. Like I said earlier, the Rosetta Stone was found broken. It has 14 lines of hieroglyphs, 32 lines of Demotic, and 53 lines of Ancient Greek. Despite the limited amounts of language on the stone, it still proved to be immensely valuable to Egyptologists. When it was first discovered, no one knew how to read any ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs. Many people still knew how to read Ancient Greek, however, and so they were able to use the Rosetta Stone to decipher the hieroglyphs. Napoleon Bonaparte campaigned in Egypt from 1798 to 1801, trying to dominate the East Mediterranean and threaten the British hold on India. It is generally believed that the stone's discovery in July 1799 was found by accident by Napoleon's soldiers. They discovered the Rosetta Stone on July 15, 1999, while digging the foundations of an addition to a fort near the modern town of Rashid, near the Nile Delta. It was built into a very old wall. The French officer in charge, Pierre-François Bocard, was said to have realized just how important the stone could be, and so he took it. When he delivered it to his commander, he spoke of a large stone found in the port city of Rosetta, which later became Rashid. Thus, the name of the Rosetta Stone was born. After Napoleon was defeated, the Treaty of Alexandria in 1801 made the stone the property of the British, along with the other antiquities that the French had found. By February 1802, the stone had been shipped to England, arriving in Portsmouth. There, they had 4 plaster casts of the inscription made. These 4 inscriptions were given to the universities of Oxford, Cambridge, Edinburgh, and Trinity College in Dublin. It was in England that scholars first began to use their knowledge of ancient Greek to decipher it. An English physicist named Thomas Young was the first to show that some of the hieroglyphs depicted a royal name, which was Ptolemy. Later, a French scholar, Jean-François Champollion, pieced together how hieroglyphs could be used to write the names of non-Egyptian rulers. He later found that alphabetic signs could have been used for the Egyptian language. He used the Rosetta Stone and his knowledge of the Coptic language, derived from ancient Egyptian, to allow him to begin reading hieroglyphic inscriptions fully. The inscription on the stone is a decree passed by a council of Egyptian priests. It affirms the legitimacy of the rule of the 13-year-old ruler Ptolemy V on the first anniversary of his coronation in 196 BC. The decree came at a contentious time in Egyptian history. Ptolemy V's father, Ptolemy IV, Philopator, and his mother, who was both the wife and the sister of his father, were both murdered in a conspiracy. The conspirators were then able to rule Egypt as Ptolemy V's guardians, since he was only 5 at the time of their death and his ascension to the throne. 2 years after, the conspirators were lynched after a revolt broke out in Alexandria. The general that led the revolt, this guy, Tlepolemus, I guess? Anyway, he replaced the conspirators as the guardian until Ptolemy V turned 12, and everyone was like, yeah, he's probably mature enough to run the entire empire. During that time, however, revolts internally were still a problem, and there was a war with the Greeks taking place on Egypt's furthest borders. The declaration was a way of getting the people of Egypt on Ptolemy V's side and accepting him as their leader. Before his rule, it was pretty unheard of for their divine rulers to weigh in on the national decisions. The inscription states, however, that an identical copy of the declaration would be in every temple across Egypt. It's unclear if they were successful in these efforts, but other copies have been found. The inscription also says that Ptolemy V had given silver and grain to the temples, that there was a lot of flooding in the Nile that he dammed for the farmers' benefit, and generally painted him as an all-around good dude that every citizen should be praising and definitely not revolting against. It's said that the king's birthday and coronation days would be celebrated annually, and that the priests would be serving him alongside the other gods. It's hard to tell if it was a bold move to flex his power, or a desperate act to prevent him from losing the throne in the throes of war and insurrection. After being shipped to England in February of 1802, it stayed with the English government until it was presented to the British Museum by King George III in July of the same year. It was so large and heavy that the museum didn't have any floors that could bear its 1,680 pounds, so they had to ask Parliament for more funds to build a new gallery capable of housing heavier items. Ever since, it's been on display there, with one exception. Near the end of World War I, in the year 1917, the museum was worried about heavy bombings in London, so it moved the stone along with many other artifacts to a postal tube railway 50 feet underground, where it stayed for the next 2 years before being returned. It currently sits in the Egyptian Sculpture Gallery on display. Since the discovery of the Rosetta Stone, various ancient bilingual or even trilingual epigraphical documents, historical documents used for the study of language, have been referred to as Rosetta Stones. Greek Brahmi coins of the Greco-Bactrian king Agathocles have been described as little Rosetta Stones, as they have allowed historians the initial progress toward understanding the Brahmi script. The Behistun inscription also frequently has been compared to the Rosetta Stone, as it links the translations of 3 ancient Middle Eastern languages, Old Persian, Elamite, and Babylonian. The Rosetta Stone acts as a bridge. It allows historians to overcome the gap in knowledge that formed after the fall of the ancient Egyptian empire and the dying out of the Egyptian language. It isn't as important to translate what was on the stone as it was to gain the tools that we can then use to translate other parts of ancient Egyptian history. We look for ways to understand our former societies to learn from them. No matter what, it takes hard work, diligence, and dedication to piece together the intricate timeline of humanity. But sometimes, if we're lucky, we stumble across the tools to make things just a little bit clearer. Today, we have those who have recognized the tools and understood their significance enough to preserve them to thank for what we know about the past. Do you want to go see the Rosetta Stone? What other Egyptian artifacts do you find interesting? Let me know down in the comments below. If you like this video, be sure to like and subscribe for more interesting content. Thank you.